Thank you for the introduction. So I am Jackie Cuyvers. I am CEO of Convosphere. So Convosphere is a social listening agency where we specialize in doing social listening in over 45 languages. So we're doing the analysis in the local language. So we're taking into context not just the lingual context and the local social media atmosphere, but also the cultural context. So what I am here to talk to you about today is social insights, emotion, intent, and activation, and how you can use different, not just social listening tools, but complementary tools to enrich data sets to get a holistic picture of the true intent of consumers and consumer behaviors so that you can build or strategize effective activations. So this is a workshop, so please feel free to ask questions as we go, or if you prefer to save them to the end, that's fine. I'm happy to answer as we go, and also happy to follow up with any questions after the conference if you have them. So here we go. So the first thing that you need to understand is that customer intent is often understood as the reason behind the action or statement of the decision process or journey towards a purchase or behavior. So in a customer journey, so where someone's intending to buy something or making the decision to buy, that's a buying decision. But there are also different journeys that should be considered. So such as a patient journey. So the patient journey is quite a bit different because it's in the same way. It can be linear, where it goes from symptoms to diagnosis to treatment. But it flows in the similar way of customers, researching, informing themselves, making a decision to purchase. So in the same way, these same approaches that we're going to walk through can be used for a customer journey in a consumer perspective or in a patient perspective. Or there may be other journeys that you may want to consider that are appropriate for your business, but these are just a few that I'm going to showcase today. So there are 3 keys to unlocking consumer intent. So from our perspective, to gain true insight, we first start with social listening. So hearing what people are saying. So whether that's through an online conversation, a forum, a blog post, a post on social media, a conversation that's happening, or even review sites. The next is putting what they say in context of what they're searching for. There's always that 99-1 rule of 90% of people who are online are consuming the content, 9% are engaging, while 1% are actively creating new content. So understanding what people are searching for is really important as well. And then lastly, to not just understand what people are saying and what people are searching for, but what people are doing online. What are their attitudes? What are their behaviors? How are they engaging? Who are they following? What type of activity are they partaking in? Looking at these 3 in conjunction can help you uncover the true intent of your audience and develop either a strategy on how to drive them to action in a relevant and meaningful way, or where potentially in that consumer journey there's a potential to impact or make changes in that behavior. Okay, here we go. So we use a number of tools, as Seth mentioned, in doing our analysis, and we find that using tools in conjunction of others can really enhance the data set. So first, we're going to start with where we start all of our projects, which is with social listening. We're a social first agency, and we specialize in social listening. And social listening is actually the process of using online conversation to answer business questions with actionable insight. It allows our clients to make data-driven decisions. But social listening is the process, whereas the output is social intelligence. So social intelligence is then the application of those social insights to make the decisions and do business differently. There are a lot of social listening tools out on the market. So the social listening tools are the software that license and gather the different data sets that are available out there. So that includes millions of blogs, forums, websites, social media such as Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. The reason why it's worthwhile to license these tools is one is that they are licensed and compliant. So you won't run afoul of invalidating or breaking terms of service of different websites or social media platforms by crawling or scraping the data. All of these tools get the data in a licensed and compliant manner. They also then are data controllers, which is important in this day and age. And then they follow the regulations for deleting tweets or the information that Google asks to be deleted. So that is then their responsibility. So these tools gather the data for you and serve as a database or repository for the data that you will be working with when you do a social listening project. Many of these tools go back and have years of historical data. However, while these tools exist, they aren't the only solution. So developing insights isn't as simple as licensing one of these tools and platforms. Whereas they might try and do the sales pitch to you that you put in your question and you pull the lever and out come your answers. It's not so simple. You still need smart people who understand the business question, the business context, the data that's being analyzed, and how to take those findings and develop insight. So insight generation from social data or any kind of data is a very human activity. It takes people who understand not just that business context, but the social and cultural context as well. And these different tools, they do have some analytics built in. And some have more than others. We find that, however, while they do have analysis such as some very basic demographics built in, some analysis in terms of sentiment, that it doesn't go very, very deep. It gives you a high level picture of the aggregate data set, which if you're looking for, high level answers could be fine for you, but true insight comes from digging deeper. And we find that some of the best insight that we're able to gain is understanding the emotional insights. So emotional insight is really important because it can help you in understanding drivers and barriers of your different stakeholders or customers. So it can help you understand purchase intent, brand choice, user adoption, switch and loyalty, adherence and churn, or even customer satisfaction. But none of the tools unveil the emotions that the customers in the journey that you're analyzing are experiencing. Instead, they give you just the sentiment. So they tell you it's positive, it's negative, or it's neutral, which is not super helpful when you're trying to understand, the drivers or barriers or how to drive, or increase customer satisfaction. So for example, if you were thinking in a health context and you were doing a project on researching cancer, most of these tools will tell you, oh, cancer, 75% of the conversations are negative. Well, that's not really surprising, because cancer sucks. But then it'll show you that some is positive, but it doesn't tell you why and what does this mean and how is this going to inform your choices on what to do differently. It really doesn't. So this is where I was saying that you really need to learn to dig deeper to understand what sits behind that sentiment. The other challenge is that these are tools that are being licensed and utilized for people from many different industries. So they are using automated sentiment detection, so AI, and they same system that's being used by someone for veterinary health is also being used by someone in luxury goods. So the AI that's looking at the sentiment, um, it can't be the best tool for every industry and every context, because otherwise it would have to be hyper specialized and focused. The other challenges are that conversations are not data points, right? They're not unique or one size fits all. Tone, irony, and humor are very subtle. Language is complex. So not only is their great variation in languages across the world, the way that these tools analyze language. So they actually use parsers, which cut the words or phrases down so that they can start to understand and ascribe meaning to these. When that works very well in English, French, German, but once you get to Thai or character-based languages like Mandarin or Japanese, it becomes very, very complex. So just even not even the tone and irony, but the actual language itself and its structure is complex for these tools to understand. Next is culture and context change meaning. So, pants in the US, I could wear pants to work in the US. I would not just wear pants to work in the UK. It would be a little chilly and embarrassing. So culture and context can change meaning. So if you're thinking about, it looking at and assigning negative or positive sentiment to that, cultural context really matters. And these tools are enterprise-based tools, so they're supposed to be global. Next is nonverbal language. So emojis don't mean the same in every culture. In Japan, the eggplant emoji just means an eggplant. And slang changes very quickly, both across languages and over time. Right. So not only is language difficult, it has particular meanings on specific channels. So if you go to Reddit or you go to other forums or social media channels online, they each have their own acronyms or specific language. So these words and this language is spoken by millions of women in the UK every day. This language is part of their everyday language. These words are familiar and used by millions on a daily basis. But if you aren't a part of that community, then you may have no idea what this says. So this is actually from Mumsnet, which is a forum in the UK, which is one of the most popular forums, parenting forums that there is in the UK. It has a language of its own, as you see. So the first one is AIBU. It means, am I being unreasonable? The next one, book, is actually the sound book, which is to puke in your mouth. And the last one is POAS, pee on a stick. So that is referencing taking a urine test for checking pregnancy. So unless you're part of that culture, these words may mean very little to you. And so the tools are not all, and platforms are not all trained on their AI for platform or community-based language. So it'd be very difficult for them to apply sentiment to this. But these are very emotive words and come from conversations or contexts that are very charged with emotion. So as I mentioned, culture and context matters. So on the left, you can see, we'll say this is Ireland, and the right is the US. So both could have been good crack last night, but the context of good crack, depending on how you spell it or even how you say it, would be very, very different. So as you can see, culture and context matters. The next is the way we speak. So not just irony and euphemisms, but idioms as well. So in the US, the slang for someone to die would be to kick the bucket. But if you tried to localize or translate that um, using a machine translation or Google Translate, you would not find what you're looking for in any other language or context. Because the equivalent in Slovenia is he went to whisper to crabs. So the idioms that are kind of ever present in every different language and country that people don't even think twice about uh, are not taken into context when these tools are looking for emotions. Lastly, different industries have their own jargon. So to be narcoleptic, the people with narcolepsy as a community refer to themselves as PWN, people with narcolepsy. Finding narcolepsy conversations and applying sentiment to them is very challenging using these tools because people use the term narcoleptic in a joking manner. They make jokes about it. Oh, I fell asleep in the middle of class, I must be narcoleptic, when they didn't actually mean that in a true health context. The other challenge is that in gaming, video games, computer-based, Xbox, etc., to be pawned or to be owned means that you completely just beat that person. And there are much more gamers out there and online talking than there are people with actual narcolepsy. So it's just an illustration that industries have their own jargon, communities have their own language, platforms and cultures all have their own languages, which make it really, really, really difficult for these tools to understand and apply sentiment and emotion accurately. So automated sentiment has its limitations. So this is from a study that we did in an autoimmune disease. So it was 52% of the sentiment was negative, 48% was positive. So how is that helpful? It's really not. It's like, oh, well, it's good, it's bad. But that's not going to help you make any decisions or truly understand what sits behind that negative or positive. So we look deeper than that. So we look at the emotions that are driving that positivity and negativity. So when we did the manual analysis, we looked at it and we saw that what was driving the negativity was frustration and sadness. So this was an autoimmune disease, but there is no permanent cure. There are treatments that can help improve the quality of life. So there was a lot of frustration and sadness because there was a lack of treatment and support options. And it's a long, long process. But what was driving the positivity was the determination to have a better quality of life and a hopeful outlook towards the future, that they know that it's not going to be cured, but by improving the quality of life, improving the support system, getting the emotional and physical support that they needed, that they could, each day maybe could be better than the last. So when you understand these, what's driving this frustration or sadness, or what's driving this determination and hope, these emotions can guide you to how you can create, where are the opportunities to impact this, and where you can really, drive activation that can improve these outcomes. So how do we get there? So Robert Plutchik is a psychologist who says there are 8 key emotions that we feel. So these include these in this ring right here: joy, trust, fear, surprise, sadness, disgust, anger, anticipation. And that within those, there are levels of it. So anticipation, can be at one level interest, at another vigilance, and they sit across from their opposing emotion. So when we do our analysis, we don't use all the levels. We use this basic level of 8. this joy, trust, fear, surprise, sadness. So we actually find this really useful. We use this on a number of different industries, whether that's pharma and life sciences. We use it on consumer goods. We use it on luxury goods, fashion. And we find it very helpful in assigning the emotions, which then allow us to understand kind of what some of those drivers or barriers are. Um, but when you're doing this, uh, it's a very manual process. So what we do is we actually export the data out of the social listening platforms. We create a Excel kind of coding frame where we um, uh, read through every conversation. It brings in the URL, it brings in a snippet. We go out, we click the URL, we go look at the conversation in context, and then we start to assign the different attributes such as demographics, the emotion. This is from a pharma one. So stage in the journey, time since diagnosis. And we do this process, and it's very time consuming. And when you're doing this across multiple markets and multiple languages, it can be quite challenging. So this is done in Excel. We have other tools that we've developed that can make it more efficient, but they don't work across industries, as you've seen, for the same reason that the automated sentiment doesn't work equally well across all industries. And in addition to the manual aspect of that is a real kind of systemic and organizational aspect that you need to coordinate and align on the emotions and the context of this content before everybody starts doing the manual coding. So what that means is, as a team, we sit down and we start going through a number of the conversations, and we highlight illustrative verbatims that say, in this context and this language, this actually represents joy. Because with those the different aspects of irony and humor and cultural context, what may be seen as joyful in one country or language or context may not be in another. So we go through and we all align on that, so that we know when we're doing the coding that there's consensus, and that all of the research and the analysis is done in the same way with the same perspective, so that it makes sense. But it does take coordination and thought. So emotions are the key to understanding these drivers and barriers impacting the customer journey. And like a roller coaster or even this crazy walkway, not all journeys are the same. So they're not all linear, and they could vary by industry or even the specific use case. So think through what this journey looks like, and we find, especially in health context, that deep diving into the emotions within a specific phase of journey and going to that level of detail is actually quite useful. So as an example, if you're thinking of the patient journey, which goes symptoms, diagnosis, treatment, and either then cure or maintenance, in that treatment phase, whereas we might have looked at the emotions that people are feeling all the way along, which is usually fear and surprise, at the beginning, because you're experiencing this crazy stuff that's never happened before, and you're receiving a diagnosis which may be shocking, and then you're maybe hopeful because they're treatments. When you deep dive within one stage itself, in this case, let's say treatment, then you can understand things like adoption. So you're going to start taking this new medicine. And then you can even get more granular and look at the emotions between different types of treatments or different types of medicines, which can then unveil why people switch medicines. And is it the fear of being prescribed the new one that's making them resist the switch? Is it the hope that this new treatment might work. And going to that granular level on the emotions, you can do this, like I say, all the way across the journey, or deep dive into specific segments, which give you even greater detail into the emotions, which can be very, very useful. So the next is after social listening, which is where we always start, and social listening is unveiling what people are saying, is the search data. So search data can unveil what people are seeking. So this is the we were talking about that 99-1 rule. So a lot of people are consuming content but not creating content. So this can unveil what they're seeking. So there are free tools out there that will help you do this. So Google Trends and Google Keyword Planner can show you the trends, the volume of these words or keywords, and the volume of searches that are happening on a monthly or annual basis. And you can compare geographies and you can compare search terms. We actually find a different tool more useful. So while the Google Trends and the Google Keyword Planner can give you volume, what we're quite often interested in is how people phrase the questions. So there's this tool that we use a lot called Answer the Public, which takes that Google search trend data and it actually groups it by the types of questions that people are asking. So for example, this is the type 2 diabetes one. Again, this can be geography specific. So this is the UK. So I typed in type 2 diabetes. So of all of the searches that are happening, it starts grouping them by can, when, where, will, are, why, which, what, how. And you could see here that the types of questions that people are asking are around, can it be reversed? Can it be cured? Can it go away? So you can imagine that many of these conversations are happening at the very start, when they've just been diagnosed. So understanding the types of questions that people ask and organizing them into a way that looks at them by context can be very useful in helping you understand not just what people are saying, but what people are searching and thinking. The last of the three pieces to understand intent is people's online attitudes and behaviors. So the content that people like, the content that people engage with, the profiles that they follow, the media that they consume, all signal their attitudes, behaviors, and interests. And this can be very useful because it's not necessarily what they're saying or what they're searching for, but what they're doing. So getting that kind of third perspective can reveal not just different consumer segments or audience segments, but it can also showcase some of their preferences, buying behaviors, channels on which to impact them or engage them, and the content or kind of activity that has the most potential or relevancy to interest them or lead them to activation. So there's a few tools out there that do this and do a really good job. So this one, I'm going to show you a few slides from Audience. So another tool that's out there is Affinio. This is using Audience, looking at the conversations that are happening that we gathered from social listening tool of all the conversations that were happening in the US for and against the vaccination of children and adults. So looking at people who believe children shouldn't be vaccinated, people who are arguing that it should. So it's quite a diversive conversation, and you can see that there are some distinct communities. So in this green community, these represent individual profiles or accounts, in this case on Twitter. So we took all of these conversations that were happening on Twitter, we fed them into this tool, Audience, and it looked at their interest, behavior, the content that they engaged with, the accounts that they followed in common, the ways that they engaged with each other. And builds a network map based on these activities, attitudes, and behaviors, and clusters and segments them. So this green segment that's very disconnected, you can see, was actually the scientists and Democrats and those who follow the argument for a science-based approach, and who are very heavily influenced by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC. And you can see that they're very connected to each other, but there's some kind of engagement that's happening here, but they're very separate. The other groups were more connected. They all, in their bios or their interests or the media that they consumed, followed a lot of conservative or Republican media, were very involved and or engaged in Trump and Trump kind of campaign activity, and had very different opinions. Within that, again, just based on the attitudes, behaviors, and preferences, there are these further segments that you can see by the colors here. So these tools are really good at helping you understand the attitudes, behaviors, online buying preferences, brands, things that really interest them and that these different audience or segments engage in. So this example here is looking at the whole group, but you can drill down into each audience and segment and understand not only their interests and their online habits, but you can understand more about them based on their bios and who they follow and even their buying preferences. So there's a lot of information that you can get there to understand about these attitudes and behaviors, which can really enrich your understanding of the customer and really, aligns very well with what you've learned from what they're saying through the social listening, what they're searching for through the search data, and then what they're doing on these channels through this kind of attitudinal behavioral data. So that's kind of the three, bringing it together. As I mentioned, there's lots of social listening tools that you can use to gather the data and understand the emotions. For the example that I'm going to briefly whiz you through, we use TalkWalker to understand the search kind of demands and the questions that people asked. We used Answer the Public, and in understanding the behavioral data, we used Audience. So we did a project for the Swiss Ice Hockey Federation. So the Swiss Ice Hockey Federation is the national organization, and it's comprised of 12 teams. So they wanted to develop further develop their fan base, drive more activation and engagement with that fan base, better understand them, and improve it so that they could validate and expand their sponsorship opportunities as well. So we took a look using social listening at their content that was going out and what was engaging well with audiences, what was driving, likes, retweets, or activity in terms of comments. And, it was very aligned with the games that were happening and the outcomes. But what we were seeing with their audience was a bit interesting. So when we looked at their followers for their engagement and their activity type, we saw that they weren't engaging with the Swiss Ice Hockey Federation content as much as they were with all of the other content and that they were engaging with on a normal basis. So we took a look at their existing audience. So here's looking at the attitudinal and behavioral. And we could see, where they were located and what their activity levels were and times and dates, and kind of what influenced them or drove their purchase intent and behavior. So we saw that, brand names, they were very focused on brand names as opposed to other audiences that are less interested in brand names. And understanding these, we could dive deeper into their interests, attitudes, and behaviors. And we're able to see that they're interested not just in Swiss ice hockey, but they are interested in other sports and fintech and outdoor adventure and travel. But what was interesting was, because we knew who the Swiss ice hockey fans were, we were able to look outside of that using social listening to gather all of the conversations about ice hockey fans in general in Switzerland and look at their attitudes and behavior and how this differed. And what was interesting was that brands were much more important to the Swiss Ice Hockey Federation fans, and general ice hockey fans were a little more versatile and were interested in more sports, regardless of it being, you know, the national team. Um, then we kind of organized what we knew about these different profiles based on not just what we had learned through social listening and the search, but through their attitudes and behaviors. And we're able to categorize this into expressive enthusiasts, passive engagers, and casual sports fans. Most of the Swiss ice hockey fans that were already there and engaging with them were in these categories. And they were like-minded hockey fans. They didn't want to miss a sporting event. But where we found real opportunity, who were not engaged in the Swiss Ice Hockey Federation's accounts and profiles, were these local community fans and casual hockey fans. And this was a real opportunity area because the Swiss Ice Hockey Federation doesn't have a national stadium like Wembley here in London for the, you know, the UK football. They actually travel around to all of these local ice rinks. And so the fact that they hadn't engaged local community fans or casual non-hockey fans was really important to see, to understand that while there are these people who want to get more engaged in community sports and community events and hockey fans who want to be more engaged in going to more events, the Swiss Ice Hockey Federation, composed of 12 teams, hadn't really been leveraging this and engaging in this. So this provided a real opportunity, which we were able to bring together through social listening, search data, and the behavioral data. So as I mentioned, their audience was here, whereas the general ice hockey fans were here, but this was a true opportunity area that we were able to unearth to make the focus from Swiss Ice Hockey Federation, you know, being national, to actually all of these events are happening locally. So there was a real opportunity to engage the local communities. So I hope this helps you understand how you can use different social listening tools and either online or offline processes to understand the emotion that sits behind the sentiment that's expressed, that you can use search tools to enrich the emotion that you've already uncovered from the social listening tools. And you can use audience, attitudinal, and behavioral tools to understand their interests, demographics, and behaviors that can then lead you to all three, unveiling the true intent of the customers that can then help you develop the strategy or content that will drive impact and activation. So thank you very much. I'm happy to answer questions if you have any. And if you don't have them now, I'm happy to answer them anytime following the conference.